And even more tragic, she was 15 now, and when she went missing, she was only 13 years old.
The story of Celeste Rivas Hernandez is one that begins with heartbreak, confusion, and a cloud of public outrage that spiraled far faster than the truth could catch up. When news first broke that the 15-year-old's decomposed body was found in the trunk of a Tesla registered to popular artist David Burke, better known as D4VD, the internet wasted no time turning a tragedy into a trial by social media. Accusations flew across timelines, old lyrics were dissected like confessions, and a narrative of murder gripped millions who wanted someone to blame. But now, weeks later, new forensic evidence and official statements from investigators have painted a far more complicated, heartbreaking story, one that reveals not a cold-blooded killer, but a tragic chain of circumstances that took the life of a vulnerable teenager long before the world even noticed she was gone. It all started back in early September 2025, when workers at Hollywood Tow on North Mansfield Avenue noticed a foul odor coming from a black 2023 Tesla Model 3 that had been towed in days earlier. The vehicle had been abandoned for weeks in the Hollywood Hills, an area where nothing goes unnoticed for long. When police opened the front trunk, known as the frunk, they discovered human remains wrapped in a black plastic bag. The body, weighing just 71 pounds and severely decomposed, was eventually identified as Celeste Rivas Hernandez through DNA, dental records, and a small tattoo on her finger. The discovery shook the city, and when it came out that the Tesla was registered to a rising young musician whose melancholy lyrics often touched on death and heartbreak, the internet connected the dots instantly. But those dots, as it turned out, didn't form the picture everyone assumed. Because while the car may have belonged to David, the artist wasn't even in California when the body was found. In fact, he had been touring across North America for weeks, with timestamps, performances, and public appearances that created an airtight alibi. Yet online, that didn't matter. The song Romantic Homicide, a melancholic hit released back in 2022, resurfaced as supposed proof of guilt. Lyrics like "In the back of my mind," "You died" were suddenly treated as confessions rather than art. But those who paid attention knew better. David had explained the song's meaning years ago, calling it metaphorical, symbolic of emotional loss, not literal death. The song predated Celeste's disappearance by nearly 2 years, but for a public hungry for scandal, that detail was irrelevant. Celeste's story itself was far more tragic and complex than social media made it out to be. She had been reported missing multiple times since early 2024, often running away from what neighbors described as a tense, unstable home. Law enforcement had been called to her family's house more than a dozen times for disturbances and suspicious circumstances. Her ex-boyfriend described a girl caught between conflict and neglect, searching for escape wherever she could find it. Each disappearance blurred into the next until her final one, sometime in the spring of 2025. It's within that space between desperation and disappearance that this story took a darker turn. For investigators, the timeline didn't add up to murder. Preliminary autopsy findings revealed no signs of trauma, no blunt force injuries, no stab wounds, no strangulation. Instead, early reports from forensic experts pointed toward a likely drug overdose. Dr. Amy Santoro, a former CSI and forensic scientist, confirmed that the autopsy showed no evidence of physical violence, suggesting the possibility of accidental death or misadventure. Toxicology results were still pending, but if those tests confirmed overdose as the cause, that would fundamentally shift the legal landscape. Instead of homicide, the focus would turn toward who was present when Celeste died, who concealed the body, and why. LAPD Captain Scott M. Williams was careful in his wording during press briefings. He confirmed that Celeste's body was indeed found in the front trunk of David Burke's Tesla, but also stated plainly that it remains unclear whether there is any criminal culpability beyond the concealment of the body. That statement carried weight. It acknowledged wrongdoing. Someone had hidden her remains, but stopped short of confirming murder. It was the difference between a killer and a cover-up, between intent and panic. And that distinction became crucial as the weeks unfolded. Search warrants executed at a Hollywood Hills rental home tied to David's manager added to the speculation. Detectives seized electronics, searched drains for traces of blood, and combed through security footage. Days later, the lease was abruptly terminated, the house cleared out, and the internet exploded with conspiracy theories. But think about it. If your client's home became ground zero for a death investigation and paparazzi were camping outside every night, would you stay? The truth might be far less sinister than the stories circulating online. David's team, through his manager Josh Marshall, insisted he had no knowledge of what happened. And all available evidence backed that up. The Tesla had been sitting in the same spot for nearly a month before being towed, long after David had left for his tour. Forensic analysis of decomposition placed Celeste's death weeks earlier, during a period when the artist was verifiably performing in other cities. The idea that he somehow killed her, disposed of her body, and went on stage the same night doesn't just stretch logic, it breaks it completely. Still, speculation about their alleged relationship continued to cloud public perception. Celeste's mother claimed her daughter had once mentioned dating a guy named David. Online sleuths found photos, tattoos, and unverified Discord messages that seemed to tie them together. But none of this has been confirmed by law enforcement. The authenticity of those screenshots remains uncertain, and authorities have not brought any charges of grooming or statutory misconduct. In other words, while the internet had already convicted him, the actual investigators had not. The deeper you dig into Celeste's life, the more this story transforms from a murder mystery into a portrait of systemic failure. A teenager repeatedly crying for help, slipping through the cracks of a system that couldn't protect her. Parents overwhelmed. Law enforcement responding again and again without finding a lasting solution. Friends who saw red flags but didn't know how to intervene. Every part of her story hints at tragedy waiting to happen, not a single evil act, but a sequence of missed chances, ignored warnings, and quiet suffering. That's what makes the forensic findings so devastating. Because if Celeste's death really was an overdose, then what happened after, the concealment of her body, the abandonment of the car, becomes an act of fear, not malice. Maybe she was with someone else that night, someone who panicked when she stopped breathing, someone who didn't know what to do. Maybe they thought hiding her body was better than calling the cops. Whatever the truth, it's clear that her death didn't come from a monster's hand, but from a mix of tragedy, neglect, and human failure. Even so, the fallout has already rewritten David Burke's career. Tour dates canceled. Sponsorships gone. His name dragged through the mud. In an era where outrage moves faster than justice, he's become a case study in how quickly perception becomes punishment. Whether he's innocent or not, his reputation may never recover. And for Celeste, the noise around her death threatens to drown out the simple, awful truth. A young life lost too soon, long before she ever had the chance to be more than a headline. As the toxicology reports inch closer to release, one thing remains certain: this story isn't just about guilt or innocence. It's about how easily truth gets buried beneath clicks, retweets, and outrage. It's about how a song written years earlier became evidence in a crime it had nothing to do with. And most of all, it's about a broken system that failed a 15-year-old girl over and over until there was nothing left to save. What do you think really happened that night, fam? Was this an accident that spiraled out of control, or is there still more to the story we haven't heard? Let me know your thoughts down below. And if you want to stay updated as this case unfolds, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because the truth, no matter how ugly or complex, deserves to be told in full.